Hello and welcome. I'm Alison Stewart and I'm the CEO of FAR and I'm the host of the Cut the Crop podcast series. And today we're talking about slug control, and we have with us Abie Horrocks, who's the IPM expert at FAR, and she's going to be talking about what you can do to best control slug damage on your farm. So for an arable farmer, what are the most susceptible crops?
Right. So the most susceptible crops would be your direct drilled clovers, for example, peas, brassicas, ryegrass, seed crops, very palatable to slugs. But that doesn't mean to say that the cereals are trouble-free. Especially if the cereals are following a more palatable, susceptible crop where the slug numbers have been able to build up. So they can certainly do damage in the cereals as well. I think it's quite good to think about it in terms of that risk window, and that's why autumn is such a problematic time of year, because especially with the later sown crops, they might be sitting there in that vulnerable stage for a longer period of time. So you need to be thinking not just about, I think, the susceptibility, but also around how tolerant that crop is to feeding damage, and how long is it sitting there in that vulnerable state. So knowing that window in terms of when you need to be monitoring and managing the slugs is really key.
So let's talk about monitoring. What's the procedure for going out and monitoring?
Right. So the main message that I'd like to get across here is that the more you can be preemptive, the better chance you have of getting in front of the game. And I think that's probably the area that where there's the most scope for sharpening up slug management. And that just really feeds back into what I was saying before about them being continuous breeders. And that means that you can really get that exponential number increase very quickly. So the earlier you can start your monitoring and your management, the better chance you have of flattening that curve and getting a good handle on the issues. So, and I think with the monitoring, there really nothing beats getting out on a drizzly night. Actually, slugs are active at night, and to see what's going on in certain problem paddocks. But also just getting out there with your slug tiles, and whether you're using just a bit of plywood or a stack. FAR actually have a whole stack of slug mats, which if anybody would like to get in touch, because we can send them out to you. And they're really good because you moisten them up. You put about 4 out in the paddock. They're 0.25 square meters each. So if you have 4, then you get a square meter count. And just move them around the paddock and get out there, and really what you're looking for is what's happening to the trends of the slug numbers. Are they staying the same? Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? So gauging that trajectory is what can be the most helpful thing with regard to decisions around management. And also on the monitoring front, I think just thinking about what those farmers know where the problem areas are on farm. It might be a paddock that has a heavier clay soil that's more prone to cracking, and where slugs tend to be more problematic, or it could be a south-facing slope, or just knowing those problem areas and looking for those key trigger warning bells, if you like, around are there delayed sowing? Is it when you're trying to get seed beds prepared? What sort of consolidation you can get, and just looking for those trigger signs too, as to when you might need to up that monitoring. But I'll just re-emphasize the fact that even when those warning bells aren't going off, that preemptive monitoring, regardless, is really, really important.
So what kind of threshold are we talking about? What numbers are we, are regarded as like low, medium, and high, where the grower needs to know that they have to get in there and do something quickly?
Yes. Thresholds are always a very tricky one. There's actually a bit of a scarcity of research on this. If you have a really susceptible crop, there's a bit of a rule of thumb around 1 slug per square metre could be enough to trigger action. I think the main point I would make here is that farmers know you get your eye in, the more you do the monitoring, the more you get your eye in over time around what's problematic for you. And maybe thinking about it more in terms of gauging that trends in numbers is a better way to look at it. Are they increasing over a short period of time? Are they staying the same? Are they decreasing? And using those the trends, if you like, to inform decision making, whether you need to get that bait on now or whether you think, okay, I can wait for a week and see what's happening. But again, it's really just probably not a one size fits all.
So what about, I mean, there are lots of different sort of slug baits out there. How does a grower decide, what slug bait is best and, when to use it?
So there's been quite a shift over the last decade with the actives. It used to be very much a methiocarb based approach in a lot of instances, but thankfully that's gone out the window primarily because a lot of companies just aren't producing it anymore. It has methiocarb baits, very broad spectrum. Not only would they kill the slug, they would also kill the crabid beetle, for example, that might come along, eat the slug that's eaten the baits, and as a consequence, it too would die. So that's called secondary poisoning, and it's not ideal if you're wanting to really encourage those beetles to be contributing to your slug control. So that the two other main actives that we see on the market today, there's the metaldehyde baits and the iron phosphate baits, and neither of those two options have the consequence of secondary poisoning. So from an IPM, an integrated pest management perspective, they're certainly the preferred option. And I would say that things are heading more down the ferric phosphate line. This is because metaldehyde is under a lot of scrutiny, especially in the UK with regards to detection levels in waterways. It can also be deadly to farm animals like dogs. So yeah, the movement would be more towards more IPM compatible iron phosphate baits, which is a good thing. And just on that front, I'd add that there's been quite a lot of work done around formulation and that in the last 10 years. So these baits are better, they're more palatable, that they're more rain fast than they used to be. And there is a lot of work now going around looking at better attractants so that they can just target the slugs quicker. So, and the ballistics and all that side of the baits research has improved. And in terms of decide, there's a lot of baits on the markets, and they'll work, and it's really just weighing up things around baiting points and application rates and figuring out what works for you. There's different sizes of baits which may or may not fit with your system. So it's really just a matter of making decision what works for you. And just one more thing around thinking about baiting. Just because you've applied one lot of baits, it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't need to apply another. So it's really important to keep on with the monitoring after the bait's been applied, and just look to see if the signs of the bait still present. If there's not, that might just mean that the slug numbers are outnumbering the baiting point. So good to keep on with the monitoring 3 to 4 weeks after the baiting. And on the other end of the spectrum, if the pressure isn't high, you might just need to put a border application of baits around the edge, bearing in mind that slugs often do come in from the field margins, especially if there are crops that they really like bordering the paddock in question. So again, just thinking about just keeping that monitoring going after a border application has gone on, just to make sure that you're on top of things in the paddock as well.
So Abby, is there a formula that the growers can use to work out how much bait that they need to apply per hectare?
There isn't a formula, but there's just simply following the recommended rate that you'll find, the label rate basically. And then again, just getting used to what works for you. There is times when maybe two actions over two separate application events might work really well. There's other times when you really just need to put on the full rate because you have a lot of slugs out there and you don't want to miss the opportunity of getting in front of them, if you like. So again, it's just following industry procedure with regard to the rates used.
So Abby, tell us a little bit more about what the opportunities are for integrated pest management with respect to slug control.
Yes, so integrated pest management is just by way of definition, this is an approach to pest control where you're integrating the biological beneficials that are out there that can really help contribute to your pest controls with good cultural controls and using those selective baits or insecticides, pesticides if the monitoring shows that they're required. And I think in the case of slugs, a lot of farmers are using an integrated approach anyway. There really isn't a one size fits all. And if you're thinking about breaking down the IPM components down a bit more, then biologically there are, as I mentioned before, the carabid beetles. We have 3 native species and possibly more that can contribute to slug control. They're generalist predators, which means that it's not just slugs that they eat. So it's unlikely that they'll give full control, but they can certainly contribute. To keep them really active in your cropping system, you need to be thinking about IPM across your whole system. For example, if you're applying a lot of synthetic pyrethroids to control other pests, they will also knock back the rabid beetles. So an IPM approach really needs to look at the whole strategy across all the pests for that particular crop. I'll just mention the cultural controls, and these farmers will be very familiar with these. And again, it's system specific. Cultivation, for example, knocks back slugs. It isn't going to be an option if you direct drill. Rolling after grazing can also knock back slug numbers. And thinking around having good soil health and nutrition. And this is important because the healthier your plant, your crop, and the sooner it can get away and be growing well, the less time it's in that vulnerable stage. So all these things are really key. I think it's probably worth mentioning that a lot of farmers are trying out new things and being really innovative around thinking about their rotation and how that they can get the best benefits. And cover crops, for example, I've certainly heard anecdotally that drilling into cover crops can actually result in less slug pressure than, for example, drilling into a lot of residue. So farmers trying out new things and talking amongst themselves about what works, I think is really, really important. So yeah, just to finishing point on that would be just there is no one size fits all, but an IPM approach really accommodates pulling together a whole lot of tools in the kits to get the best result and partnering that up with the monitoring. And I'll say it again, that the preemptive approach.
Thank you very much, Abby. Lots of really useful tips for slug control. And thank you very much to the listeners, and have a great day on the farm.